listeners, welcome back in Startup People. Today we have another special guest from United States and we will talk about education, technology and of course startups. Welcome here George Derisa. George is a professor at University of Colorado, technology lover and much more. Hey George.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Welcome in Startup People, George, and I thank you for accepting an invitation to our podcast. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
So, for the beginning, every guest in our podcast has to pitch their startup. It's just, our habit. Would you dare to pitch yourself in 30 seconds? I will count it.
Okay, well, let's see. I guess my startup right now is Cosmos Partners. That's my consulting organization. So I would say you need to come to Cosmos Partners if you are looking for the way to create a business, build your business, grow your business, and become very profitable.
Okay, thank you so much. That was fast. Better than so many startups here. They are struggling a little bit. And okay, I know you you are a technology geek and you were repairing all the things of your friends and stuff. So how did you come up with the fact that you are a technology geek?
I think that's something that started with me as a very small child. I was very curious about how things worked. And so I grew up in my parents' home taking things apart and trying to put them together to make them work differently or make them work better. And so I think that stuck with me throughout the rest of my life. And when I had the opportunity to become part of technology companies, that was very exciting because there was always something new and always something different, and it kept my interest.
Okay. We know that George started as a public school teacher, that you started as a public school teacher back then, and now you are a college professor. Can you tell us how is it going with digitization in schools in USA now? Because I would like to talk about, a little bit of COVID. I know it's a really annoying topic, but here in Czech, it's quite a big issue. Because high school teachers had to learn all the necessary technologies to be able to work properly. And a lot of them were lost a long time. So how was it in USA? I'm very curious.
It's very mixed in the United States. We have teachers that are very technologically oriented. They're very gifted in their understanding of technology, and they managed through the pandemic remote teaching and so on very, very easily. There are others that had to be trained, and schools were unprepared to do that because they had failed to invest in technology. They had failed to train teachers or require teachers be knowledgeable. And so that they struggled through that. So I think it's, everything on that spectrum from we don't know what to do or how to do it to we've got this, we've got it under control and everything is going to work fine.
Yeah, because in Czech it was crazy because everybody were, a little bit stressed about it. And also, as you said, the technology has to be, they had to get the technology. So the big investment. And also, I'm curious about the question I said before. How is, the difference back and now? Like, is it really going so fast? Like back then when you were teaching in the public school, I mean, digitization.
So when I was teaching, I taught 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. So I had children aged from around 9 years old until about 12 years old or 13 years old. And at that time, there were not very many computers around at all, and certainly not in the schools. And I introduced my classrooms and many teachers to how to use computers. Mm-hmm. At that time, there wasn't any software for education either. And so I ended up teaching myself how to code and building my own software products to use with my class. I think that's what really got me hooked into computer and digital technology in general. Nowadays, of course, there are digital devices in every classroom, not necessarily because educators bring them in, but because the children do. They have their own smartphones or tablets or even laptops that they bring to school. But fundamentally, what hasn't changed very much is how we educate children and how we train our teachers to educate children.
Yeah, that was actually my question. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have better tools, but if a laptop just replaces a pencil and paper, is it really doing that much to help a child learn something different? In particular, how to innovate or how to use technology and access to knowledge in a different way. And I think that that's probably one of the flaws in our educational system, is that while the tools may change, the system itself has not changed in probably 300 years since it was created.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because it's up to people, I think. That we keep the old habits, maybe the professors in universities or high schools. Yeah, that we have to change our attitude to teach, how to teach, maybe, and system. Yeah.
And we need to teach our teachers better.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
There's no reason why any of us should have been caught by surprise and not known how to set up a digital environment to teach remotely. That's a very, very straightforward thing to do. And yet teachers still have a fear of digital technology and a fear of not knowing as much as their students know. And so I think that teachers need to be trained in the adequate use of the tools as a minimum, but also trained in what magical changes can evolve from using those tools in a classroom. One of the problems that I discovered teaching was that teachers are not taught how people think or how people learn. And if you don't know how the brain actually goes through the process of thinking or how the brain actually goes through the process of learning, it's kind of like taking your car to a mechanic that has never looked under the hood and expecting them to do a good job fixing it. If you don't know what's in there, how can you influence it and how can you maximize learning in a classroom environment?
Yeah, I agree. That's why we are trying to educate also teachers with the technology all we have. So I think it's the step forward to to have a better system and to educate teachers and so. And also after you were teaching in a public school, you then went to the big corporate company, I think AT&T. Is it correct?
Yes, I was actually at AT&T before I started teaching. I was doing that when I was in college. That paid my way through college.
Okay, and there you started your own startups. So how did it go? And how was it at the time?
Because I had been teaching and I was very disillusioned with our school system, I, as I mentioned before, taught myself how to code. And so 2 other persons and myself, we started a company in Silicon Valley, and we were building a hardware product, and I was doing all the coding for the hardware product. And that first startup actually lasted for maybe about 18 months or so, and then we failed. And so I had a friend who was joining another startup company. I was the 9th person to come into that company. And we built the company up to about 55 people. It was a software company only. And then it failed. And so what that taught me was that learning to become an educator, learning to become a teacher doesn't teach you anything about business or even how to make a living, really. And so I went to another company that was a small company at the time called Applu. And they had more employees and more traction. And I stayed with Applu for the next 11 years after that. Half of my time was in Silicon Valley at their headquarters, and the other half of time was in Sydney, Australia at the headquarters for Applu Australia.
That's cool. I think that's that's a dream come true of every startupper to work in Apple. And what was your role in Apple?
Well, over 11 years, I had a lot of roles. Almost everything that I did was customer facing because I like working with people. And so I did things like customer support and technical support and project management and a whole number of other things. So I had most of the out-facing organizations at one time or another I was working within. And I think the only thing that I didn't do actively that was out-facing was sales. But I had a sales support function working with and managing systems engineers. So during that time at Apple, it was very special because Apple was a company that was very entrepreneurial. And that's actually where I learned how to be an entrepreneur. I created 6 business units within Apple during my 11 years there. And those business units still are up and running. And that brings me to another interesting phenomenon. When you read in the media about entrepreneurs, you almost always equate that exactly with startups. But an entrepreneur doesn't have to start a new company. There are many different types of entrepreneurs, one of which is what I would call the intrapreneur, which is what I did at Apple. I created new business units within an existing corporation. You can have an entrepreneurial mindset and you can be innovative working for a large company or starting your own.
After I just go back to your startups you founded and you failed, what was your motivation to go on, to just don't give up and go on?
Yeah, there are a lot of people that when they fail, they give up. But when I fail, and what I encourage my students to do is to take the learning from the failing and become better with it. And so my philosophy has always been for lifelong learning. And the only way you can learn effectively is through failure. Failure, actually, if you think about it, is how we learn almost everything. You did not walk straight out of your mother's womb. You had to fall over and you fell again and again and again before you mastered the act of walking. Same thing with riding a bicycle. You don't do that the first time you get on the bike. You do it after you fall and you crash and you do all sorts of other things. Same thing with skiing, same things with playing piano. And we have a name for that that's different than failure. We call it practice. And when it's practice, it becomes very acceptable. That's how we learn, is through practice. But practice is nothing more than repeated failure on your way to mastering anything you're trying to do.
Totally true. Yeah. When you worked in Apple, how does it work there with the community, with the startup community? Did you do something with that, or get together?
Well, there's a lot of different roles that Apple plays in that kind of business ecosystem. One is by creating entrepreneurs that go out and create companies beyond Apple. Another is interacting with smaller companies and helping them with their technologies for the sake of building the Apple ecosystem, if you will. And still another is the opportunity to do conferences and trade shows and other kinds of events to help influence the communities to either develop for Apple or work with Apple in some meaningful way.
So when I will work in Apple, can I start up? Can I be an entrepreneur and do a startup?
Yeah, Apple's philosophy has always been that anybody can have a good idea. Good ideas are not the exclusive property of executives or vice presidents or things like that. So knowing that anyone can have a good idea, the next step is to figure out how can we make that good idea into something real that gives us some advantage. And the way that Apple structured it is that if you had a good idea, you could go to your boss and basically pitch your boss this idea, and the boss would find a way to, if they liked it enough, to help you to fund it. There was money specifically set aside for people who wanted to turn their ideas into reality. And other bosses would cooperate by lending you employees from their organization so that you could build a team, and then you would build your idea, you would build your dream, whatever that was. So for example, one of the things that we created was something called the Direct Response Center, and that was Apple's first fee-based incoming call center. And to do that, I wrote a business plan. I pitched my boss. I pitched a couple of other organizations, marketing and sales and IT and so on, and ended up with a team of 14 people that worked with me to create this organization and create this idea. I ended up hiring a handful of people, and we started the business and launched it as a service to our customers for the most complicated products that we had at that time. And so people would pay us to help support the products that they bought from Apple.
Oh my God, it seems crazy to step up in front of my boss in Apple and pitch my startup. It's crazy, you know. It has to be really stressful, and I think you have to be really ready for it. So is it necessary to have the business, the lean canvas and business plan ready?
No, you can have a good idea and pitch the idea, and then your next step might be to build a business plan and talk about how you're going to make that idea come to life. And that was not unusual within Apple. And it's the same thing that we do in the entrepreneurial community. We might pitch an idea to a group of investors, for example, and they'll say, we'd like to invest in you, but we need to know exactly how you're going to do this. And so you go off and you build a plan for doing it, either an operational plan or a marketing plan or a full business plan. The thing that's really important is that it doesn't really take a lot of courage, but it does take a pretty powerful belief that your idea is going to be successful, that you can do this. And that belief comes from experience and, again, from practice and from failing.
Yeah. I think it's really important to hear the right feedback from people like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it makes you stronger. And it's a challenge. But I think the work itself in Apple is a challenge, and it's hard and fun, maybe.
Hard things are fun.
Yeah. I think a lot of people ask you about work in Apple.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Sorry to bother you with that.
Oh, not a problem at all. So after Apple, I moved to where I live now in Colorado, and then did 7 more technology startups.
Wow.
And then it was after all of that I decided it was time to go back to teaching and working with entrepreneurs directly to make other people successful. And that's what I've been doing ever since. Yeah,
I was about to ask you what brought you back to teaching, actually.
Yeah, it was a terrible tragedy, to be honest. I had sold one of my companies to a large global company called Gartner. And part of the deal was that I had to work for Gartner for a period of time, 2 years, in order to earn the money that they paid for my startup company. And it was during that time I was the managing vice president of consulting for the western part of the United States. And I ended up making a sales call to a client in New York City. And that sales call happened to be taking place at 9 a.m. on the morning of September 11th, 2001.
Oh my God.
And if you know what happened on that date in New York City, my client had their headquarters occupying 22 floors above the center of Tower 2. And I was supposed to be there at 9 a.m., which is a few minutes after the second plane hit. And I wasn't there. My client had called me the night before and explained that they were very, very busy at the corporate offices, and could I meet at their Midtown office? Well, I had done that already 3 months before, so I was a little bit angry. And I contacted my sales guy and I said, you go take the meeting, shake their hands, pat their back. We'll try another shot at corporate later. And I decided not to attend that meeting in the Midtown offices either. And so I was treated to watching all of the chaos that ensued after the planes hit the towers. And I walked around New York City that day, watching people coming from the south of the island covered with blood and ashes and so on. And I thought to myself that I'd kind of lost my way. I went into teaching because I wanted to change the world in a positive way by helping youngsters grow up and be motivated to make positive change. And I kind of lost my way with all the glitter and gold of Silicon Valley. And I promised myself that after I got out of there, if I got out of there, I would dedicate the rest of my career to making meaning ahead of making money. And so I quit my job with Gartner as soon as I got back. I wandered around trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And ultimately, I ended up coming to the realization that I was trained as an educator and experienced as an entrepreneur, so maybe I could teach entrepreneurship. And I went and pitched that idea to the business school in Colorado, and they said, let's give it a try. And so I've been there for 16 years now.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry that something as horrible happened to you, but fortunately it didn't happen to you. But I think this kind of thing just change your attitude, I guess. So you start thinking about your life maybe, and about some, I don't know, better sense of your life probably.
Yes, it was definitely an eye opener, and it was one of those things that really was transformational. And I was walking around the city wondering if I was ever going to make it back to my wife and my two children. Both my boys were 7 and 4 at that time, and so it was a very
Amazing.
challenging moment.
Okay, and then you went back to university, or you decide to work in university and teach, and you are still there probably, right?
Yes, I teach in the spring every year, and in the fall I've started coming to Slovenia and teaching at a private college there. I do a lot of work in Slovenia, and of course in the Czech Republic. I've been working with the University of West Bohemia in Pilsen and the Czech Technical Institute in Prague.
Yeah, that's why we know each other.
Just so it's through that work that I found a great deal of joy in being in your part of the world and in working with some very smart and wonderful entrepreneurs to help them to become successful. Because the meaning that I find in my life now is watching other people become successful and contributing some small bit to that success.
How is Silicon Valley now if you compare it with Slovenia or Czech Republic? I know Czech Republic is not really close to you, or you spend more time in Slovenia, but what is the difference? Or I know it's huge difference, but what is the biggest difference?
There are a lot of differences. The biggest difference, of course, is that the US is a much larger market. Yeah. And so it's more accessible. And the consequence of that is that you have a lot more startups on a daily basis being created in Silicon Valley. The thing that's really changing now, and I think it's going to change the world, quite frankly, if it continues as a trend, is that because we got used to the idea of working remotely, there are a lot of people moving out of Silicon Valley to places that they would rather live, but still working in that environment virtually. And the consequence of that is that suddenly makes the whole world kind of all the same. It levels that playing field. And if you can work virtually from Prague, you can work virtually in Silicon Valley from Prague. So I think it will open a lot more opportunities in the future.
For sure, hopefully, because I asked before. I asked because all the startups we have here in Sitport, I think a lot of them want to go to Silicon Valley, or is their dream to go to Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Because they are young and United States and American dream, startup world.
Right. Well, Silicon Valley gets a lot of media coverage, and so it's very easy to become enamored with that or to fall in love with that. There also is the reality that startups are failing every day there, and it's a very challenging and expensive place to live. So it's not necessarily the greatest place on earth, although the media would like you to believe that it is. I think that there are, again, such opportunities around the world that are available to anyone, anywhere now that has access to technology. And I think that that's really the gift that COVID has brought us, is the realization that we don't have to be stuck in an office in Silicon Valley or in Prague or anywhere else for that matter. There are things that we can do from our homes, and wherever that home is fine as long as you're connected.
Yeah, it's a great change. And I think one of the last questions, what do you think is the most important thing for starting the company? The essentials.
I think it's what you just said. You actually have to start. It's great to listen to podcasts and to hear from people who have experience. It's also great to take courses in entrepreneurship. It's great to learn about business and accounting and operations and human resources and marketing and sales. All those things are really, really important. And it's kind of the same as if you're wanting to learn to play piano and you just listen to music and you listen to great pianists talk about their careers and you read a lot about piano and you read about how it works and stuff. But if you don't put your fingers on the keyboard, you will never play. And so the most important thing for an entrepreneur is to actually start the company, to actually do it, and to not fear failure, because failure is how you learn to do the next one better.
Well said. Thank you, George. And I hope that you will come here in Prague again, in Pilsen, and we will meet in person. And
I honestly cannot wait.
Yeah. I can't wait too. And hopefully I will go to Colorado or somewhere to see. And really, really thank you. Really appreciate it that you were part of our podcast. And I really think that this podcast will inspire so many startups and so many people.
Well, I am welcoming you here to Colorado anytime you come. And you have my contact details. I hope you'll share those with others. I'm more than happy to talk to willing entrepreneurs. So please share my contact details and let's connect.
Just one last question, just hop on my mind now.
Okay.
Do you have some, startup community in Colorado in your university? You are the person behind it, maybe?
I have been for a very long time. We have something that we call the New Venture Challenge, and we help startups to create themselves or to be created within the university, and then they do the new entrepreneurship or the new venture challenge. And the winners of the challenge end up with $100,000 in seed money.
Nice.
And a whole bunch of free services from attorneys, accountants, and other people that you kind of need to really get your business off the ground. So I have a number of startups that have been started actually in my classes and have left my classes and gone into the wild and become really successful companies. So yeah, we have a great deal. Everything that I do in teaching is experiential. It's about actually going through the steps of making your company come to life. And so from that perspective, we turn out a great number of startups. And the University of Colorado is actually very famous for a whole bunch of different things that are that should be of interest to entrepreneurs. There's lots of new technologies coming out of here all the time.
Nice. Well, check it out.
Please do.
Thank you again, George, and hopefully we will see each other. And also, I wish you a good luck in life and everything. And hopefully we will,
Thank you. I'll look forward. I'll look forward to when we get to meet.
Thank you and bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, listeners, for listening to this podcast, Startup People, and I will looking forward to you next time. Bye.